Welcome to Catching Up with Katy, local and state updates by your state senator, Kathleen O'Connor Ives. I'm Katy O'Connor Ives, and I'm very excited to be with you for what is the pilot episode, and I could not think of a better guest than our own Representative Brian Dempsey of the City of Haverhill.
Thank you, Katy. It's great to be here. Let me congratulate you on putting the show together, Catching Up with Katy. I think it's terrific, and I think an important way to communicate with your constituents throughout your district. And I know that the viewers will appreciate the opportunity to have guests from time to time. So thank you it's an honor that I am your first guest, and I look forward to chatting about so many issues that are important to so many of all of our constituents. So thank you for this great honor.
Absolutely. We're all so busy, and I think this is an excellent opportunity to update residents in the City of Haverhill and folks throughout the Merrimack Valley about the work that we're doing. And there's a lot to catch up on. I think folks have read in the newspapers and heard on the radio about Harbor Place.
Yes.
And if they're driving in downtown Haverhill, they can see it taking shape. So I'm very interested in hearing the latest about that subject.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for asking. And let me just say that thank you for your support. You have, as a senator for our district for the last 3.5 years, done an outstanding job, and your support of Harbor Place and so many of the initiatives that we have here in the City of Haverhill has been critical to our success. So we want to recognize that publicly. And it is an exciting time for the City of Haverhill. I was driving home a few months back and drove downtown and saw the first site of the steel being erected, and the excitement that I felt, and I know that everyone in the City of Haverhill is feeling about that project is tremendous. And I think that, as you know, Katy, it is very significant for a couple of reasons. I think as a gateway city, we see an opportunity to utilize the Merrimack River and look at a parcel that had been really abandoned for over 5 decades, which is amazing when you think of it. Folks, some of our seniors will recall Woolworth Drugstore, vacant since that time. And it really took a tremendous partnership. It takes a tremendous partnership to look at doing a development at that scale to really make it workable for the downtown. And fortunately, with the partnership of the Haverhill Foundation, the Greater Haverhill Foundation has done a tremendous job for the city for so many years, constructing the Wood Hill Industrial Park. We have so many great members of the board at the Greater Haverhill Foundation that have invested. Ron Trombley is its president, Sally Sarasulo O'Rourke, Vin O'Rourke, and so many other great community leaders stepped up years ago. And really, Sally was the catalyst in saying, let's acquire the Woolworth property because we know it's a key parcel in downtown Haverhill. And of course, that happened, and then an economic downturn occurred, and nothing happened for a number of years. And then along came the Planning Office for Urban Affairs, which is really an extension of the Archdiocese focused on housing and other developments. And that partnership that came together between the Greater Haverhill Foundation, the Planning Office for Urban Affairs, and of course the role that we can play in state government in trying to leverage some state resources, not only in terms of providing funding, but also in attracting UMass Lowell to be an anchor tenant, and the anchor tenant, along with Pentucket Bank and so many others, and HC Media, of course.
Right.
So we're really excited that HC Media is going to be a key piece to this. That all of it coming together, I think, required a great team, great partnership. Certainly your work, as well as Representative Campbell, Representative DeZoglio, and certainly Mayor Fiorentini, the City Council, the School Committee, everybody coming together for the best interests of the city. So it's a great time. It is amazing to see the progress and how quickly it's moving along. And I think folks that maybe had some doubts a year or two ago about whether this was real or not, they can see firsthand that this thing is moving. And additionally, you will see in the back of that structure, you'll see a new boardwalk constructed, really capitalizing on the Merrimack River. So it's a great opportunity for the city. We will bring UMass Lowell into downtown Haverhill. Chancellor Maloney, who is the new chancellor for UMass Lowell, very excited about the partnership. So a lot of good stuff happening and very, very exciting. And I think it also ties into something you've been a great leader on, which is the River Initiative. And maybe you could share with folks your great work on that, because I think it is a very important piece and a very important component to the long-term vision of what I think all of us view Harbor Place will result in.
There's a lot of momentum right now, and I think that the fact that Haverhill is on the river is a huge and unique asset. Haverhill's very special because not a lot of cities can boast having the commuter rail, having the river, and having a major highway, 495, all in the same area. So how do we leverage that to be very competitive with other regions for tourism? And when I was in the last session, the chair of the tourism committee, we were really able to appreciate that it's the third biggest economic driver for our state. And those are dollars that are not tax dollars from the residents, it's people visiting. So how do we get people to Haverhill? The Merrimack River is not only a drinking water supply, but people really appreciate it for recreation. And like you said, where you're having all of this special development happening that's going to be connected to the water, people are going to get that. And we're going to have kayakers and crew teams and people that are seeing that they can do shopping and enjoy the restaurants in the downtown and potentially be able to take the train from Boston into Haverhill and then take a boat all the way down to Newburyport and then get back on the Newburyport line home. So that's kind of a very unique necklace that we have. And the first phase, with your help for the River Cities Initiative, was to secure funding to do a brochure that literally maps out all the resources we have along the river and shows that we have historical resources and cultural resources that people need to discover.
Absolutely. And again, I think we all appreciate your great leadership on this. As chair of tourism last session, you were able to utilize that position really to help advance what is something we've always talked about in the city of Haverhill, is how do you capitalize on the river? How do you maximize our proximity to so many other great communities that have that in common? And how do you begin to look at, as you point out, utilizing the river for kayaking and boating, and again, some of that's happening now, but I think we see a bigger opportunity. And I think it also speaks, Katy, to the idea of additional development up and down the river. I think if you look at parcels in the city of Haverhill that are undeveloped at this point, I think Harbor Place, we view, will be a catalyst for that. Not only along the side on that side of the river, but I think across the river, where if you go down the Merrimack River and you look at, again, real estate up and down, there's tremendous value on being on the river, and I think we see that opportunity, see the potential, and I think there's a real energy. So I think your work on this initiative, Harbor Place, the great team, all of that, I think, brings a great deal of energy to what we want to accomplish. So I think there's a real excitement happening right now, and your leadership on this has been terrific. And I think long term, it's excitement. It's exciting to think about the prospects going forward. So
I agree. It's all about momentum.
Yes.
And right now, with the development at Harbor Place coming along, and the fact that phase 1 of the River Cities Initiative is done, phase 2 is just completed, which was actually an initiative funded by the Greater Haverhill Foundation to improve the navigation of the river. So although folks might be more comfortable going out from Amesbury, Salisbury, Newburyport into the ocean, boaters, if they only had a clearer path, like any roadway, should be more comfortable navigating up all the way to downtown Haverhill. And working with the Coast Guard over the summer, they were able to improve those channel markers and the buoys. So with each boating season, I think that folks are going to become more and more comfortable with heading our way.
Absolutely. So it's an exciting time, and hopefully we'll be out in a boat down there and really enjoying and capitalizing once we see the final construction.
Absolutely. Like any project, there are many phases.
That's right.
And it's good to have the teamwork and collaboration that we have.
Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of collaboration, I think that folks around here appreciate that you are the chair of Ways and Means.
Yes.
And represent us very well.
Thank you.
But on a day-to-day basis, I know that people may be curious about what it really means in terms of the type of work that happens and what you're responsible for, both at a municipal district level, but also the responsibility for statewide determinations that you're making for our Commonwealth's budget. Sure.
Well, thank you. It's a fascinating job. It's a very busy job and a very demanding job at times, but an exciting job because you have an opportunity to work each and every day, not only on budget matters, but on a number of policy matters as well. And for the viewers, we have a $38 billion budget here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And each year, the governor, the lieutenant governor will file their proposal with respect to how they see funding for the upcoming fiscal year. And we begin this process. As you know, we actually began this week. As Senator Ives is a member of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, we had a consensus revenue hearing, and that's one of the most important hearings of the year, in which we come together, both the House and the Senate committees on Ways and Means, to determine how our tax revenue growth looks for the upcoming fiscal year. We will agree on a number, and that number will be the basis on which we build the budget into the next fiscal year. Having said that, we anticipate that Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito will file their budget late January. And once we have their view of the upcoming fiscal year, it'll then start in the House, and it'll be my responsibility to work with the Committee on Ways and Means and begin the process of doing deep analysis of the governor's proposals relative to spending, looking at what their priorities are, looking at what our revenues are, and we will make a determination after several months, or at least a few months. I wish we had several months of analysis in meeting with members of the House, meeting with advocates, meeting with various agencies. We will make a determination in terms of what the House recommendations are relative to spending. We may have similar priorities. We may have different priorities. We may have different spending levels depending upon what the accounts may be. But it's really the task of House Ways and Means to go through that process, really February, March, and April, very intense months for us. We will then release our recommendations. We'll have a debate in the House. Members are invited to file amendments and make changes to what we recommend as a committee. As you know, there'll probably be 1,000 amendments that are filed, literally 800 to 1,000 or 1,200 amendments. And we'll go through that budget week, and we'll debate the budget. We'll accept some amendments, we'll reject some amendments. And it's really a healthy process because each and every member of the House has an opportunity to weigh in on his or her priorities. And in the end, we'll pass a budget to the House and ship it over to our friends in the Senate. And you will go through a very similar process in which Senate Ways and Means will do a full analysis. We may have things in common. We may have differences. You will go through the process of putting out your recommendations and having a full budget debate. And at that point, when that's done, we have what's called a conference committee, in which there are 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate that will meet, and we will reconcile the differences between both the House and the Senate versions and come up with a consolidated, not consolidated, but a consensus report that is really something that we find ends up being a little bit of everything. It's certainly some of the House initiatives, the Senate initiatives, the governor's initiatives, and it's always keeping in mind, I think, a couple of things. It's keeping in mind that it's important to watch the bottom line and to make sure that we are being prudent with our use of resources, but watching how much we're spending. It's making sure that we are funding critical needs and services. But it's also making sure that we are being fiscally prudent both in the short term and long term, meaning it's important to continue to put money away in our stabilization, our rainy day account. Massachusetts has the 8th largest rainy day account in the country. We are $1.25 billion. Certainly not as much as I would like to see, but certainly better than many other states. We'll also look at things that are not so interesting, perhaps, like pension funding, and making sure that we're looking at that debt and making sure we're paying down. So it's utilizing funds both for the short term and long term, critical services, and it really, as you know, Katy, from your work on the budget, as a member of Senate Ways and Means, it becomes really about balance. It's watching the bottom line, doing short-term, long-term, and making sure that we're, again, dealing with critical services and priorities for the citizens of the Commonwealth.
I appreciate you breaking it down that way because there's a certain time frame for all of these things to happen, and there's also really in-depth analysis. So it's not something where simply because you passed a budget last year, it's an automatic for what will happen in the following year. Everything is so dynamic, and needs change. And like you said, there are these variables in terms of what we need to do for strong bond ratings and to make sure that we're planning for the future in terms of how expensive it is to borrow money, where our priorities lie. And it's a challenging situation because Massachusetts is a state that has lots of infrastructure and a dense population. And sometimes when we're compared to other states, you can't compare us to anyone. We're very unique.
That's
and
right.
You really rise to the challenge to be able to deal with all of these demands
Thank you.
for what are limited resources.
Thank you. And fortunately, and it's interesting for the viewers, you have 200 legislators. We have 160 state reps. We have 40 state senators. And you try to put together a document, a budget that reflects the collective views. And not everyone agrees with everything, but you may have 40 or 50 members that feel a certain way. So it's all about, I think, a balanced approach, making sure that we're dealing with a number of issues. And as you point out, very importantly, the bond rating. We have the highest bond rating in the history of the Commonwealth right now. That's very important for the point you point out, which is how much we're paying for our debt. And when that bond rating is, if it's downgraded, we end up paying more when we go out to borrow. So that's a very important area that we pay very, very careful attention to. So again, it goes back to the fundamentals, which is keeping an eye on the bond rating, keeping an eye on the rainy day or the stabilization fund, making sure we're paying down pension debt. Those states that haven't done that, and New Jersey is a great example, and it's instructive to look at New Jersey. They've had their bond rating downgraded several times over the last few years, and a large reason is because they're not paying attention to the pension debt. So you try to do a little bit of everything. But again, we have, as you point out, so many needs. Certainly education, public safety, the homelessness issue, the opioid issue. So many areas that we have to continue to make investments in to deal with the challenges that we face, not only in Haverhill, but in every city and town in your district, in every city and town in the Commonwealth. And we know what those needs are. The challenge is you can always make a case to increase a line item, and everyone that comes in makes a pretty good case to increase their line item. The question becomes, how much can you actually do, and how quickly can you go, and what's sustainable? Every year you can't increase a line item by 5 or 10%. It's just not sustainable because we have to keep our eye on the bottom line. So it really is a balanced approach, recognizing that when we increase the budget, and I show increases over the last few years, those increases are not one time. We live with them for years to come, and it becomes the new base every year. So you keep that in mind as well. But it's important to, I think, do the best job that we possibly can for our constituents.
And I think residents, both locally and statewide, they benefit from the fact that you have experience in this highly technical area of state government. This is not something that you can just walk into. I think that you need to have that institutional knowledge and historical perspective, how we did it before in order to pave a path forward.
Absolutely. It's been great having chaired a few committees through the years, and you pick up experience, and I think I think listening to members and meeting with folks and really just trying to take some time to reflect on, again, what are the fundamentals and how do we continue to provide services and be financially responsible are important. And I would say that, certainly Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, as the new administration, I think have done a very good job, and we're working closely on, a lot of issues. And I think we're all on the same page in terms of making sure that we're being fiscally responsible in how we utilize the taxpayers' dollars, but at the same time dealing with the challenges that we're all aware of.
Right, absolutely. In terms of education, you had mentioned that's one aspect of the budget that folks are probably familiar with. And we have been consistently investing in what's called the Early College Program that impacts Haverhill and a number of communities in the Merrimack Valley. So I thank you for your support for that initiative, because it does two things. The wonderful community college we have in our neck of the woods, Northern Essex Community College, is able to facilitate opportunities for high schoolers throughout the Merrimack Valley that want to take college courses. And we know that college is getting very expensive. Students are wary of collecting more debt And if they participate in the early college program, they can save money, they can save time, and then also fully explore whether or not college is right for them. So that's a unique opportunity.
Well, it's great, and you've been a great leader on that, and I thank you because you have made that a priority, and we've paid attention to that priority, and I think you've done it for that very reason, where you have an opportunity for our high school students to get a head start and a jump on the opportunity to obtain credit, and it took additional state funding. So you, as our great senator, made that a priority, and I thank you for that because I know it's helping so many students here in Haverhill and throughout your senatorial district. We are very fortunate to have Northern Essex Community College. What an asset for the city of Haverhill, and the growth that they're seeing, I think, is reflective of the challenges that we see with respect to tuition and affordability. As you know, we have increased funding for higher ed over the last few years. A couple years there, we were able to, or at least one year, we were able to freeze tuition and fees as a result of those increases. And I think it, again, reflects, I think, our response to the growing concern that affordability is a challenge. We certainly want to make sure, and I think your point of promoting this program really speaks to the issue of affordability and making sure that students that want to obtain an education ought to be able to get it. And public higher education is absolutely critical to that. Community colleges as a tremendous entryway into the higher ed system. The University of Massachusetts, clearly, as a leader in all of our state universities that do such an important job, but it really is a value today, despite the affordability issue, public higher ed, and we've got to continue to make sure that it is a value for our students, because in many cases, without Northern Essex, without UMass Lowell, without Salem State, without many, our students today wouldn't have an opportunity to get their degree. So I think you making it a priority, all of us making it a priority, we've got to continue along that track.
Well, you have focused for a long time in doing what you can to ensure that we can keep that talent pool here in Massachusetts, because our state is known for education, healthcare, biotech, high tech. But how do we keep that talent pool here and attract not only small and large businesses, but also talented employees?
That's right. That's right. It's critical. And we've talked about this in terms of economic development. We've talked about this in terms of the business community, that Massachusetts continues to be strong and continues to be a leader in large part because of our great education institutions and our skilled workforce.
Right.
We've got to continue to develop that.
It's important because, like anything else, whether you're talking tourism or you're talking how to attract businesses, it's a competitive environment. And we have to figure out how to play to our strengths as a state and hopefully increase employment, because that helps our revenue base.
That's right.
We also have to figure out how we're going to keep it affordable, because housing can be expensive, education can be expensive, and we really want to improve everyone's quality of life. And if you look at the line items in the budget, that's what that reflects.
That's right.
Are those different competing interests, and we want to do it responsibly.
That's right.
And I know that you're up to the task.
Absolutely, together with you and our great delegation that works so well together in advancing the issues that are so important to Haverhill and to all the communities in your district.
It's true, and it's a great honor of mine to be able to co-chair the Community Development and Small Business Committee in the legislature. We're working on a number of bills that directly impact small businesses, because we're in that unique position in our neck of the woods to be very close to the New Hampshire border.
That's right.
Which brings us unique challenges. So
That's right.
It's definitely something that's fascinating, because I respect and appreciate, as you do, that small businesses are the backbone. And if we grow the ranks of small businesses, that only helps our larger economy.
Well, I can tell you, I was very excited when Senator Rosenberg promoted you to chair that committee this year, because I think it's such an important committee, not only for Haverhill, Greater Haverhill and the Merrimack Valley, but statewide. We know that small business really, truly is the backbone of our economy, and I think to have you sitting there with your experience and your vantage point of representing a district that is adjacent to New Hampshire, I think provides a great perspective that is having an impact statewide. There are so many bills that are filed each and every session, and a number of them go to that committee because it's a very important committee. So I was thrilled that you were appointed there. I think it speaks volumes of the respect that you have in the Senate, and I also think that it's very important to have a strong leader working on those issues that have a statewide impact.
What I really enjoy, and I know you can appreciate it, is the collaborative nature of working in the legislature.
Yes.
In the Senate, it's literally a round table with 40 seats around it.
Right.
And it's like
a little different in the House, Katy.
But I really appreciate the opportunity to figure out how to work with others and find that common ground. It's really fulfilling and eye-opening because not only are we focused on the issues that matter to our communities here in the Merrimack Valley, but we're also responsible for statewide challenges and so many different issues on any one given day.
That's right.
So we certainly don't have to worry about being bored.
We don't, and as we know, it's fascinating because there are so many different perspectives, viewpoints, and philosophical differences among the 200 legislators. But again, I think it is collaborative, and I think there is always mutual respect, and I think a sense of trying to get to a place that is really, truly in the best interest of the Commonwealth. And I think a lot of times, that effort to advance, whether it be a bill or a budget or whatever the issue may be, that trying to find common ground is oftentimes the most interesting because you do have a chance to really listen and learn from others that you're serving with, and you try to take the best ideas of all viewpoints and come up with consensus legislation that, again, is in the best interest of our constituents and the Commonwealth, again, both for the short term and the long term.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself because ultimately we're responsible and accountable to the public who's put us in that position to do the work. So
Yes.
on that note, I want to
Yes.
thank you so much for joining
Thank
me
you.
on the pilot episode of Catching Up with Katy.
I'm excited. Thank you.
I
Great to be
figure,
here.
like any pilot, you want to get the best guest possible so they'll keep your show running. And here you are, and I greatly appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege, and I'm thrilled to have been your very first guest. I think that you will get signed up for additional episodes. This is like Seinfeld or something, the pilot series. But Catching Up with Katy, I think, will be around for a while, and I think it's a great service that you are providing as a way to stay connected to folks in your district. So thanks for doing this, and it's been fun and informative to be on.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for joining us for this inaugural episode. We hope you'll join us again in the future. And I also want to say a special thank you to HC Media for beginning this program, Catching Up with Katy. We look forward to having you join us again in the future.